This is why you should never knock on a stranger's door. Once there was a man trying to check into a hotel. The woman at the front desk gave him his key and told him none of the guests are allowed to go into the room across the hall. He agreed, but as he continued to stay in the hotel, he grew more and more curious about the room he wasn't supposed to go in. At one point, he even walked down the hall to that room and tried the door. It was locked. Then he bent down and looked through the keyhole. He saw that it was just the same as his hotel room. But in the corner of the room, there was a woman whose skin was extremely pale, almost a sickly white. Her back was to the wall, so the man didn't see what she looked like. He almost knocked on the door, but then just decided to leave her alone. The next day, he walked past the door again and decided to look into the keyhole. This time, there was no hotel room and no woman. It was all just red. He thought that this seemed really strange, so he went to the front desk and asked about the room. After insisting on an answer, the woman at the front desk told him, "A long time ago, a man killed his wife in that room, and her ghost is still there. But these ghosts are not what you might imagine. They're completely white all over, except for their eyes, which are red."
This is the time my mom faked her death so she didn't have to take care of me and my siblings. Yes, this girl really faked her death. So at the time, I was 5 and my little brother was 3. It started off with my mom saying that she didn't feel well and she couldn't pick me up from school, so the bus would have to take me home. Well, a few months after, she started getting picked up from our house by this black car. She said that car was picking her up because of her so-called doctor's appointments. And she wasn't able to drive herself because she was too sick. Well, one day when this car came to pick her up, she never came home. Me and my little brother were sitting around for a couple days waiting for her to come home, but she never came home, and we were young, so we didn't do anything. Eventually, my aunt came over to our house and told my little brother and I that our mom had passed away and that she was cremated and they kept the ashes. So our aunt started taking care of us. Until one day I saw my aunt getting picked up by that same black car. That's when I started to get suspicious of everything and I decided to check these ashes. When I checked, it was flour. Like for part 2. This is part 2 of the time my mom faked her death so she didn't have to take care of me and my siblings. Like I said, my aunt told me that my mom had died and they cremated her and they let her keep the ashes and that she was going to start taking care of us. Me not knowing how long the cremating process actually took at the time since I was so young, I believed her. Until one day I saw my aunt getting picked up by the same black car that my mom used to get picked up by before she died. That's when I decided to check these supposed ashes and it was actually flour. So one day when my aunt got picked up by this black car, I decided to follow her. I didn't have a car. I was 5 years old, so I had to follow them by walking and hiding behind bushes. I was able to follow them up the street, and once they turned the corner, and there I saw my mom standing on the side of the street. That's when I see the car stop and I see my aunt get out and approach my mother. She tells my mom to give her money for covering for her and taking care of me and my little brother. Mom says she faked her death because my dad wasn't in our lives and she didn't want to take care of us anymore. I'm older now and I cut her off completely and I have full custody of my little brother.
Story time of how we almost got kidnapped. So me and my best mate were having some cocktails by the river. It was summertime and time was flying by and it began to get dark. Bear in mind that the river to the main roads were like a 20-minute walk, so we were far from anyone and anything. The river was also quite hidden, so we agreed to go back before it started getting dark. It was a little scary. We had to go through the woods, and by the time we'd got onto this little motorway bridge, it was literally pitch black. And we still had so far to go. So we carried on walking, there was woods either side of us, and my friend legit made us stop because she had saw some bats, and I don't know why she thought they would stay there, but we ended up standing there for about 2 minutes. Dead ass, no joke, we were standing there and heard a whistle from the trees next to us, and when I tell you, we have never ran so far and so fast in our lives. It was horrifying. We still had to go over another little bridge. We had to go through train tracks and cow fields. We got over this river bridge and legit was running for our lives. My friend looked back and this guy was about 2 feet away from us. I'm running out of time, so like part 2. Story time. We almost got kidnapped part 2. So like I was saying, my friend looked back and this guy was about 2 meters away from us. We had got over the little bridge, but we still had to go over the train tracks, through the cow fields and all of that stuff. We were like halfway through the cow fields. We dropped our bottles and just carried on running. Then we had to go through the train tracks. Bear in mind, you have to open these gates to get through them, so that would just be holding back time. It was absolutely horrifying, but the guy must have stopped running because when we looked back, he wasn't there. But we continued running because we still had so far to go and we had to walk home, which made it even worse. I guess it was our fault because we went back when it was dark, but we were just wondering what his plan was to do because he was just there by himself in the dark and in the woods. It's like, what was his plans? But anyways, the next day we decided to come back. I have no idea why we decided to come back, but we did. It was in the middle of the day and our straws and our bottles were literally laying there on the ground. It was so weird to see because we had dropped them the night before, but they were completely full and unopened. So when we dropped the bottles, that's when he must have stopped running for us.
This is why you should always pay attention to details. A woman was brushing her hair when she found a little bump at the back of her head, so she called her husband to have him check it out for her. He said it looks like a button. It's small, round, hairless, and flat at the top. He joked around it with her, asking, "What do you think would happen if I pressed it?" Then he did, and the woman instantly leaned up and gave him a kiss. Then the husband kept pressing it as a joke, but something went wrong. It seemed like he pressed it all too many times, and a cool numbness spread down the woman's neck, around her arms and her legs. Her eyes automatically shut and her vision went black. A while later, the woman woke up and learned that she had fainted. The husband kept apologizing with tears in his eyes as if it was all his fault. Eventually, they both went about their lives and tried to forget about this incident, but the woman just couldn't, because afterwards, she came across a photo of her family in the living room. It was a photo of her and her husband's wedding propped up on a ceramic urn. She looked closer at the photo of her own face. She's smiling as if she's the happiest girl in the world, but there's a small scar under her left eyebrow, a scar that she now didn't have.
This is why you should never spend the night on Niku Island. In 1937, while on her flight around the world, Amelia Earhart mysteriously vanished over Howland Island in the Pacific Ocean. Despite an enormous search, she was never found. 3 years after her disappearance, a scientist discovered an incomplete skeleton on this tiny, uninhabited island called Niku Island that wasn't too far from Howland Island. It looked like whoever's bones these were, they had been ripped limb from limb. But when the bones were examined, they determined they were not Amelia Earhart's. But in 2017, a forensic anthropologist re-examined the bones and determined they were almost definitely Amelia's. So scientists went to Niku Island and they found freckle cream, something Amelia was famous for using. So the working theory is she crash-landed on Niku Island and she fell asleep somewhere on the beach. Then, after smelling her blood, hundreds of 3-foot-wide coconut crabs came out of their burrows, swarmed her, and ate her.
My sister and I have always been mistaken as twins. I'm 19 and she's 16, but we have the same height, skin tone, and similar voice. She also has a habit of being a copycat, from the way I dress to hobbies, even piercings. I know it's cute if you look at it from the outside, but sometimes it gets annoying. Like, yeah, we are quite close too, but why does she always happen to pick up everything I pick up? One afternoon, I was tidying up some costumes in my college showroom and found a rather cute brown and pink wig. It looks like a mushroom. I put it on, think it looks rather funny, so I snapped a picture and posted it to my Instagram. I received a text from my sister asking if I really cut my hair. I didn't mention it was a wig. While I somewhat have a feeling that she might copy that too, I lied and replied yes. I came home that weekend and lo and behold, my sister emerged with the same silly brown and pink bob cut, except this one is on her permanent hair. She was surprised that I arrived with my hair still long, then realized that I lied to her. She was furious that she had to cut that silly hairstyle because she thought I had it. Our parents think that it's a really bad joke and wanted me to cut my hair too to make it up to her. So am I the asshole for telling my sister I cut my hair when I really didn't?
Short and mysterious story time. So me and my sister were annoyed and playing pranks on my mum and stepdad. We hid in cupboards and we changed locations making scary noises. Until eventually they found us and we admitted to it because we were just bored and we wanted to go to sleep. So like I would normally do, I went and slept with my sister because I wanted to stay in her room that night. We were just having general chit chat until we saw a man just standing there in the window. Legit, there was just a grey figure just standing there staring. We couldn't figure out his face. We didn't know if it was our parents playing pranks on us because we did it to them. But we was 11 and 12 years old. We was just so scared. So we were screaming for our parents, but of course they didn't believe us. It didn't even feel like they blinked an eye. No one responded to us. So we just assumed that it was our stepdad doing this. Until we ran into their room screaming and crying and they were legit just both there laying on the bed. They didn't believe us, and when my stepdad went into our room to go check it out, there was a piece of shattered glass just laying there on the bed. And still to this day, do our parents think that we placed it there. Follow my Instagram, Caradowntonn, for more stories.
Have you let anyone borrow your phone before? One woman let her son borrow her phone, but she could have never expected the terrifying things she saw after she got her phone back. So this woman got her new phone and she put it on the kitchen counter and went to watch some TV. That's when her son came in and asked if he could borrow the phone to play with it. The woman didn't think much of it at first, so she agreed, but she could have never known that this would lead to a terrifying discovery. When it was nighttime, she got ready to tuck her son into bed, so she went upstairs to his room, but he wasn't there. Then she ran over to her room and saw him sleeping on her bed with the new phone in his hand. She felt relieved, so she took her phone back and started looking through it. At first, nothing was out of the ordinary. She saw her background had changed, but it wasn't until she saw the photos that she found the horrifying surprise. There were many new photos on her phone that her son took around the house, the front door, the kitchen, and even photos of her taken from the back when she was watching TV. She started deleting these photos until the last one caught her eye. Instantly, she turned around, terrified. It was a photo of her son sleeping in her bed, but it was taken by someone else, someone standing above him, and on the edge of the photo was half of a stranger's face.
One time I was behind the register at Victoria's Secret. This customer walks in and immediately everybody spots her as a red flag. She's just picking up items, throwing them in her bag, not looking at sizes, not looking at colors. So everybody's like, everyone's on their walkie like, watch this customer. She's coming to the fitting room. She's headed to the cash wrap. Somebody get her. Check her ID. Get her. Get her. She has a bag full of stuff. And guess who gets her at the register? Me. So she comes to my register and she dumps out her stuff and we're having a regular conversation. Hi, how are you? Yada, yada, yada. Her total comes up to probably between $700 to $900. It was expensive. My manager is at the register next to me talking to me on the walkie. Ashley, make sure you get that ID. Don't matter what she's using, make sure you get that ID. So I ask her for the ID because she's paying credit. Why do you need to ask for my ID? Just take it, run it. I'm like, no ma'am, I'm sorry, I need your ID for the purchase. She starts to raise her voice at me.
My neighbors are snitches. So yesterday I was really bored, so I just decided that I would drive around my neighborhood. So I got in my car, I was warming it up, whatever, and I see my neighbor staring at me through their window. So I'm like, is this dude really about to say something? So I just ignore him. I'm like, do whatever you want to do, I don't care. And I pull out of my driveway and I drive off. 2 seconds later, I see my neighbor's car following me. So I'm like, you know what? Maybe they're just leaving the neighborhood. Maybe they're going to the store or something. Maybe they're not even following me. So I take a left, they take a left. I take another left, they take another left. To the point where I make a whole circle and they keep following me. So I'm like, these bitches are really following me right now. So I did 2 more circles around the neighborhood, still were following me. Up until I pulled into my driveway.